Hey everyone, this is Mike, and in today's video I wanted to talk a little bit about the HUD, why it's important that setting up a right HUD for you can help you improve in the game, but also some easy quality of life changes that are more specific for just having a better time playing Final Fantasy XIV by just having some handy shortcuts added to your HUD as well. And then last but not least, I'm also going to show you how I set up my HUD and how you can kind of do it yourself as well, so that you can have the best HUD that works the best for you. So first of all, my philosophy behind my HUD is kind of started out when I started playing in Heavensward, when I played Machinist specifically, because Machinist was the first job that I played that had procs introduced to it. And my biggest problem was that I spent way too much time looking at my hotbar and not focusing on the boss enough. And to kind of circumvent this, I made like one really big hotbar on top of my hotbars, and there I would basically put all of my procs or my important skills on. And that kind of transformed over the times into this little hotbar that you can see here on the left of the screen. Now, of course, as other stuff got introduced in Stormblood, like the job gauges, as well as the ability to break up boss hotbars or target bars and all of that kind of stuff, my HUD has kind of changed into what it is right now. So if I pull up my HUD real quick, you'll see that most of my stuff is located around this part of the screen. Now, of course, we still have all of my actions down here at the bottom, and we have stuff like the enemy list here, and then of course like some extra hotbars, but these are basically all just quality of life stuff. This part right here, this is the most important thing on my whole hotbar, as it basically contains all of the important information for me. So target info status, this means that it shows me all of the buffs and debuffs that are active on the boss. So if I go back on my bars real quick and I apply my dots, you'll see that my dots, instead of ticking over here on the boss hotbar, you'll see them over here at the bottom. This also goes for the progress bar. This basically means that whenever a boss starts casting an ability, like say for example Titan starts casting Stone Crusher or whatever that ability is called, it'll show up down here. Now I can't show this on a dummy because dummies don't cast abilities, but if you check it back in one of my previous videos where I'm like doing the raid or something, you'll see that all of the boss cast abilities are targeting over here instead of next to the boss hotbar over here at the top or something like that. Now, the reason why I did all of these things is basically to have all of the important information in one place. So for example, I'm going to take Bard as an example of this, because Bard is a very proc heavy job, like with all of their like Refulgent Arrow procs, Bloodletter procs, and then of course like your Pitch Perfects, which you can see on your buff hotbar and that kind of stuff as well. So that's why I'm taking Bard as an example. And then of course you also need to keep track of your dots, which is really important to Bard as well. So, reason why I did this is because basically, like this, all of my information is in this little space right here, meaning that I can focus on the boss most of the time, and then I can just quickly glance over to the bottom left and have access to all of the things that I need to know at a quick glance. Because for example, for Bard, to play it well, you don't need to look at all of this that's... oh, I accidentally clicked on the screen. You don't have to look at everything that's down here. The most important things are up here. The only things that I would need to look down for is, for example, my Nature's Min, like if I want to know the cooldown of that, my Troubadour, for example, and then maybe something like a Second Wind if I were to need it. But all of the other stuff is up here. Now you might be wondering, well, your stuff like your Barrage or your songs aren't there. Well, that's because it doesn't really matter. I know that Raging Strikes is 80 seconds, Barrage is 80 seconds, and Wondrous Minuet is also 80 seconds. And I know that when my Raging Strikes comes up, that's when I need to go into Wondrous Minuet, and that's also when I need to Barrage. So that's why I only have this one ability on here that keeps track of the timer of that 80-second duration. And then when this is up, I know that these other two abilities are also going to be up. And then stuff like your dots or your burst shot, your apex arrow, I don't need to keep track of any of this thing. Because with my dots I can just see them here. My GCD I can track with my Refulgent Arrow, like if I just use my GCD you'll see that my GCD timer rolls here as well. And then of course when my Refulgent Arrow is up, this thing lights up. Of course my Bloodletter reset, whenever that happens during Mage's Ballad, I'll just see this thing reset. And all of that stuff. So basically all of the important stuff is over here, and it's like that for all of my jobs. So I can just easily keep track of things. Now the reason why this is really good is especially if you're something like a newer player that doesn't have a lot of muscle memory yet, or if you're somebody like me that plays a lot of different jobs, you of course won't have the muscle memory for all of these different jobs that you're playing. So that's why having this thing to kind of help you out can go a long way. So that's kind of like the philosophy behind why my hotbar looks the way it is. I'll show you how to set it up in just a second. I'm going to aggro the boss to kind of show you some other things about my HUD layout as well. And of course the things over here, not that important. This is like a like for some easy access to stupid emotes and stuff like that. But this thing over here is some really good quality of life stuff. So if you want to switch jobs in Final Fantasy, you'd have to pull up your character sheet, go in here, like scroll down the list of all of the jobs that you have, and then be like, okay, equip set, there we go. Now I've equipped my scholar. But if you're somebody that likes to switch around jobs a lot, always go into this list, finding whichever job you want to play, and then equipping that set can be a bit of a hassle. So what I did is I basically clicked on these things, I dragged them over to a hotbar, which is this one on the right, and then this allows me to just with one button press switch to whatever job I want to play, just like that. It goes really fast, really quickly, and it's super easy to do. And I have all of my things over here. Now of course, this does link to your gear set, so you do need to make a gear set first before you can do this. But once you have it made, you can just switch to whatever job that you have over here, which is really useful. The way that you do this is you go into character configuration and into the hotbar settings, and then you go into sharing. So my hotbars 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 are for character specific stuff. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is my hotbar 6. And then I have 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which are these over here. Now I do have one hotbar that I'm not using, I believe. Oh no, never mind. The 10 is my emote hotbar over here, and then these other 4 are these 3 down here, which are to switch jobs, to have like a pull macro. This ends the duration, or like ends the encounter on my ACT, allows me to mark stuff like a ready check, limit break, sprint. These are things that I can use on all of my other jobs, basically. And then of course like these things are all character or class specific, because they will change and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of set all of that stuff up. So let's now talk about how I made these things possible. So I'm going to go into my HUD layout, and I'm going to switch real quick to a different one. This is a basic HUD setup. As you can see, it looks kind of shit. But here you can basically think of what things do I need, what things do I not need, and what can I change with like party like size and stuff as well, because you can resize all of your hotbars into the way that you want it to. So first of all, I'm gonna show the hotbars that I need. So for example, hotbar 4 and 6, I need those because those have abilities on it that I'm gonna be using. Parameter bar, I'm gonna throw that shit to the side. Cross hotbar, this is something that you have for controller players. Since I don't play with a controller, I do not care about this one bit. I'm gonna throw this stuff to the side, and then we'll just do it like this real quick. So right now I kinda threw all of the stuff that I need on there for now, and then we're gonna start hiding stuff. So first of all, this thing right here, inventory grid, I never use this, I don't care about this. Just right click it so it has a purple name, and now it won't show up. Notices, you can't hide, unfortunately enough. Just put it somewhere that it doesn't matter for you. Just put it over here. But then stuff like, for example, your party list. Like my party list is gigantic at the moment, so you can rescale this down. You can do so by holding Control Home. This will scale it up, and once you hit the maximum scale, it scales down. So for example, I kind of like this size, so I'll put it over here so that the party list is not too big, and I'll put my focus target above it. Right now I don't really use the focus target bar that much, as usually when I want something like that I just look at the enemy list, because I'm used to it from fights like Shinryu and Yukop, because the enemy list is quite useful for stuff like that. But when you don't want to use the enemy list, you can just use focus target if you're a healer or something like that, and you're busy healing and you can't keep track of the boss that way. Then you can use this over here. And then we're going to start changing some stuff. So first of all, hotbars. The normal hotbars to me are not super important because I am mainly looking at that mini hotbar. So I'm going to resize all of these into a smaller version. So we're going to drag those down to the bottom as well, because I don't really care about them too much. number 2, number 3, and then number 4. There we go. So those are my 4 hotbars now at the bottom, which I'm not really going to care about too much. Something else I don't really care about is my experience bar. So we'll just put that at the bottom as well. That doesn't really take up too much space, so it's not too important. Now, onto the important stuff. So for example, your HP, I usually like having this. So I just put this on top of my hotbars. Then the important stuff, hotbar 6. I'm going to rescale this as well because it doesn't need to be that big. So just put it like this. Then hotbar 5 was a shared one, I believe, so I'll put this down here at the bottom. I'm gonna show this one real quick. And then like 8 and 7 and 9, I believe, were the ones where I had my, what are they called again? My skills on them. And then hotbar 10, that was the one that had all of my cool emotes. Oh, this one actually isn't showing. There we go. So it's still a bit messy right now, right? We still have, this is way too big, so we're gonna rescale this as well. We have our buffs which are still up here, so we're gonna change that too. And then this used to look different as well. So what you can do, I believe it is in here. So for example, this is my hotbar 10. Now, the way that it looks right now, it looks pretty bad. And I'm gonna make it look like this tiny hotbar over here. So hotbar 10, I want it to look like this, or this one. No, it's like this. So you can switch this around so that they have like a different setup kind of thing. And now it looks the way that I want it to look. So I can just put it down here, bam, and done. And then of course I can just rescale it so that it's smaller, so that it takes up less screen space. And there we go. And then I could technically do that for these things as well, but I'm not gonna take too much time about these small hotbars because they're not really all too important for what I want to show you. Then of course your job gauges, you can change these quite a lot as well. So for example, step gauge and 4-fold feathers looks like this. I'm gonna dance real quick, but try not to aggro anything. But as you can see, this is like quite a big gauge and takes up quite a bit of space on your screen as well. But what you can do, for example, is you can put them into simple mode. So when you click on it, you go over here, you can see 4-fold feathers, and then you have the UI element settings. When you click on this, you can tap this button right here, which makes you switch the job gauge to the simple mode, and it changes it quite a bit. So as you can see, now that really big gauge on top of the screen has become a tiny bar. For some other jobs, this changes stuff quite dramatically, like for example on Red Mage. If I go to my Hud Layout, I have my balance gauge right here. As you can see, this is really tiny, just 2 small gauges. But then, for example, if I were to have this in the normal mode, you can see that it's a way bigger gauge. For some other jobs, this makes a lot of sense as well, like for example with Warrior, Paladin, Dark Knight. You don't really need these really big gauges because the gauge is just a bar, really, that you need to keep track of. For some it helps, like for example for Samurai, I prefer having something like the... I don't really like these tiny ones because I'm so used to seeing the... Wait, let me just scroll down into my Sen gauge. To just seeing the actual symbols, like being big. So that's why I prefer having the bigger Sen gauge compared to like having the tiny thingies on top of my hotbar. But that's all personal preference. So there's the stuff that you have to like kind of experiment with yourself, what you prefer the most and how it works best for you. For me, for example, for Samurai, this is one of the gauges that I prefer having the normal version of instead of the simplified version. But for most of my jobs, I use all of the simplified versions. Now, let's talk about the thing with the boss target bar and the cool stuff that you can do with that. So normally, the boss bar, I'm gonna go back on my Bard. When I target a boss, it looks like this. You just have your bar on top of the screen, and then when you put debuffs up on the boss, they show right underneath it, and then of course when the boss uses an ability, it'll show up right here as well. Now, what you can do is you can go into your HUD layout, click on the target bar, and then in settings, display target info independently. And when you do this, it basically breaks the hotbar. So now we have target info HP. This is just the HP of the target. We have status. This is the stuff that shows my dots and stuff. and we have progress bar. I'm gonna click on, oh wait, scroll down a bit, try to find it, because sometimes it's on like the background, so you can't click on it. And then you have to find it in the list over here. And now we have target info progress bar. This is like the cast bar when the boss is casting an ability. So if I save that now, if I click on it, you can see HP is still up here. But when I apply my dots now, the dots are going to show up down here. And this was important for me because I like having everything in the same place, so that it's easier for me to keep track of. And you can do that with some other stuff as well. Like for example, I get my song gauge, bam, drag it over here as well. Progress bar, this is for when I'm playing a caster. Duty list, not too important, it's just like your quests and such. Alliance list 1 and 2, I'll just put them over here. Because they're not super important either for me. What's mainly important for me if I'm playing a healer is my party list, which is down here. For example, status effects, that is important for me, so I'm gonna drag that down here so that it's with the rest of all of my stuff. And then I'm pretty much done with my HUD right now. Like pet hotbar, I guess I can just put down here as well, because pet hotbar is not super important. But yeah, that's basically how I made my HUD. It's what I prefer the most as well. Like as you can see, I have my enmity list or my enemy list over here, so that if other enemies that I'm not targeting are casting abilities, I can keep track of it. Can be useful for like those harder fights like UCOP, Ultima, stuff like that, to keep track of some stuff. I'm gonna switch to Scholar real quick if I can find it, because these hotbars look a bit different than the ones I'm used to. So for example, if I summon my pet, it'll show up here on the right as well. This is not super important because you can also drag all of these abilities onto your hotbar. As you can see, I have my two, like my placement for my fairy, and then if I want my fairy to come back to me and such, I have that on my hotbar and not on the pet hotbar itself. So if you want, you can just like rescale it, or even hide the pet hotbar if you don't want it there, just like that. Of course, hiding hotbars also works with your normal spells. Like for example, my 1, 2, 3 are my spammable abilities, I guess you could say, with my broil. But say that I don't need these, because like for example with Bart, you don't need to see them. I can hide the hotbar, but I still have access to all of the abilities that are on the hotbar, as you can see. So you don't actually need to see the hotbar in order to be able to use the abilities. So maybe you can kind of take the same principle as what I did with the mini actions over here. Just put your important stuff right there, and then all of the abilities that you don't need your hotbar for, you can just hide those hotbars to have even more real estate when it comes to your screen space. So those are kind of like some cool tips and tricks that you can do with your hotbar, help you set it up so that it feels better for you to use, and maybe helps you improve a bit as well. Because what I found for a lot of newer players, or even some good players as well, like a friend of mine also has this problem, and he's been playing since A Realm Reborn, is that you sometimes lose track of some of your abilities, and then you're either focusing too much on the boss and not enough on your rotation, or you're focusing too much on your rotation and not on the boss, which then makes it so that you might fail mechanics, get damage downs, stuff like that, which then again makes you perform worse in the raid in the end. So these are just some cool little tips that you can use to change your HUD layout a little bit, and then maybe it'll help you improve a bit as well, from just a little bit of quality of life to make it easier to switch in between your jobs, from in between some other stuff that you can do with your HUD to make it easier to keep track of things. Of course, this little hotbar is not hotkeyed either. All of my hotkeys are still down here. So this is just purely there to show cooldown timers and that kind of stuff. So with all of that being said, I hope you learned something today. I hope the video was useful and that you can do something with it as well in your own gameplay. And with that, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.